Hi there. My name is Grover. Today is Wednesday, November 19th, and this is my final update with Grover Reads the News for now. I hope your coffee is hot, your tea just right, and I hope you'll keep listening as I sign off on this past year of updates with you all. I started this podcast, an audio digest newsletter, in the week before the 2024 U.S. presidential election, which saw Donald Trump win a majority of votes for his second term. As anticipated, his attacks on democratic institutions, the rule of law, and the basic human rights of people, especially immigrants, paired with the gutting of the national workforce and the deployment of military forces onto our city streets, escalated quickly. I knew that so many people had turned off the news, and I wanted to create a space where people could rebuild their muscle to face the news together. I hoped you would feel less alone and less overwhelmed in facing the news, because I think what's happening in the world around us affects us deeply, and we need to make informed decisions based on what's happening. Thank you to each and every one of you who subscribed to this newsletter and this podcast, who shared Grover Reads the News with your friends and community members, and especially to the paid supporters who invested to offset the cost and making this podcast. I will turn off paid subscription for the podcast after this episode, and I invite you to join me on my other Substack publication, You've Got Mail, Only Butch and Platonic, or to share a tip in the Buy Me a Coffee tip jar at the end of this post if you'd like to financially support my work as a writer and creator going forward. I'm not done with this type of responsive and community-invested creation work that I clearly am committed to, because I keep doing it going on a decade now. I just know that I need to shift out of regular production and allow for longer, slower work to emerge at this time. So many people, maybe you listening to this right now, have been brave. Maybe you were among the 7 million people who showed up to October's No King protest. Maybe you joined a group of your neighbors blowing orange whistles in Chicago to warn of ICE sightings, or you blockaded the Coast Guard entrance road in my old town of Alameda, California, to muck up ICE operations. Maybe you've welcomed in a neighbor when they needed it and are helping feed your community when the Trump administration chooses to starve them by refusing SNAP payouts. As I shared in the last episode, I left the United States this summer and am living in the Netherlands, rebuilding my life here. I'm making new friends, learning a lot, and enjoying life on a bike instead of in a car. There is grief and there is ease, and I am resituating myself into my role in this moment in our global fight against fascism, inequality, genocide, and a fight for democratic decision-making and economic equity. One of these roles that I have is as a writer and a communicator. My wife, Nova Wehman-Brown, and I co-authored a workbook to help others decide if leaving the U.S. is right for them, and create a backup exit plan just in case you need it. It's called Should I Stay or Should I Go? A step-by-step workbook to help you decide if leaving the U.S. is right for you. It has 61 colorful worksheet pages, guiding each reader to name their priorities and longings, assess where they might live and how they might do it, determine their thresholds for leaving, given changing conditions, and determine what needs to be resourced to root down and stay where you are now, if that's what you decide to do. It's available now at stayergoworkbook.com or anywhere you read ebooks. It'll be available at bookstores and libraries at the end of November, so please request that they order a copy if you don't see it on their shelves, or head over to stayergoworkbook.com to place an order for a paperback book. I've been watching the bravery of you from the Netherlands, which has its own particular protest traditions and its own particular challenges. Since I last released an episode in September, there have been a number of youth-led protests and uprisings in countries across the world, including in Morocco, Madagascar, Peru, and Mexico, as youth make clear that, as CNN put it, inequality and marginalization is destroying young people's hopes for the future, and the only way forward is to confront a broken social contract head-on, unquote. This follows on the heels of a full change in the Nepali regime and voting that was coordinated by Nepali youth on Discord after youth-led protests fighting against a social media ban, economic stagnation, and government corruption. It also follows a year of protest in Serbia against corruption after 16 people were killed when a newly renovated building collapsed on them. These uprisings and protests by youth do not imply that the whole world is rising up for justice. The right wing in countries across the world continue to take notes from the playbook of Donald Trump. And even here in the Netherlands, while they weren't able to gain control of the parliament, a Trump-like leader was supported by a large portion of the country. This is to say, no one knows our future. It is uncontested, and it will be made by the people here on this earth right now. I believe that what is happening in the world affects our daily lives so deeply, whether we know about it or not. And so I hope that in the year ahead, you practice what I've been thinking of as information resilience, a way of engaging with information so you can take in news or updates or changing conditions that matter for your connection to the world and your own personal life. And I hope that you can do this in a way that doesn't necessarily tank your whole day, that doesn't increase your anxiety. I think of information resilience as a grounded way of facing what is, synthesizing what it means for you and how you will relate to the world, and then having the tools to close your browser or your tab or your earbuds and do the physical, tangible work of building your life each day. I will write more about information resilience in my other Substack newsletter. It's called You've Got Mail, Only Butch and Platonic, and it's where most of my public writing and thinking will live over the next year. I'll put a link in the show notes and in Substack for you to subscribe if you'd like to keep engaging with my work. If you're looking for podcasts or email newsletters to give you important updates on the news, I have a couple of recommendations. And which one you engage with really depends on your priorities about the news topics that are important to you and whether you listen to the news or prefer to read about it. I strongly recommend subscribing to Kelly Hayes' email newsletter called Organizing My Thoughts. It usually includes a personal reflection or update and a list of important to read articles, usually having to do with fights for democracy and human rights. She's a longtime community organizer within the U.S. left movements and a reporter for Truth Out, and I find valuable reads and grounding in her email newsletter summaries. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you updated on U.S. authoritarianism and fascism in a way that's approachable, kind, and connected, I recommend listening to Jairus Dixon's Fascism Barometer. She situates listeners within current events for the month, makes an assessment of where the fascism barometer is pointing, and then engages in a deeper discussion with leaders within left community organizing. If you're looking for U.S. news updates with contextual information, basically the opposite of doom scroll, shock and awe, I recommend something that Substack tells me a lot of you are already doing, which is listening to Heather Cox Richardson's Letters from an American on podcast or Substack. If you're looking for a different brown-haired butch to talk with you about chaotic U.S. news with good news updates and a kind tone, I recommend subscribing to V. Spehar's Under the Desk News. No matter how you listen, I hope we can support each other in balancing the intake of information and putting down the tech for some portion of every day. I hope we can support each other in blending action with rest. I'm curious about democratic communications infrastructure and strategies that are 3 or 4 chess moves into the future. For a long time, I've been longing for a space to go deeper and use slower thinking and writing. I plan to do a lot more reading and writing in the year ahead, and I hope to connect with you through the Stay Aurora workbook and various activities associated with the book, the You've Got Mail Substack newsletter, and whatever other publications may come out along the way. May you be like a tardigrade, also called a water bear or a moss piglet, a microscopic creature that can survive almost anything. May you do it with others. May you be brave. May you be fed. Until next time, be well.